The wind howled through the narrow ridges of the Himalayas, dragging with it a fine mist of snow that kissed the ancient rocks and danced across the steep faces like ghosts from another time. Here, at an altitude where the air was thin and the world seemed to hold its breath, time moved differently, and so did life. Dr. Elian Daster had been in these mountains for almost 5 months. A wildlife biologist from Mumbai, he had spent a decade studying predators across Asia, but nothing had prepared him for the challenge of tracking the elusive car lepora, the snow leopard. Locals called it Shan, the ghost of the mountains. Sightings were rare, encounters even rarer. His base camp stood precariously on the edge of a valley in Zanskar, flanked by icy cliffs and sheer drops. Each morning he emerged from his canvas tent bundled in thick layers, breath steaming in the cold. His only companion? A journal already half filled with drawings, notes, and hopes, some grounded, others far-fetched. The snow leopard was not just a subject of scientific inquiry. It was to Elian a symbol of fragility, of endurance, of wildness untouched. One afternoon, as the sun dipped behind a distant ridge, casting long shadows over the glacier fields, Elian spotted something. Not far from his observation point, a rocky outcrop overlooking a frozen stream, footprints appeared in the fresh snow. Large, round, deliberate. His heart thudded in his chest. He knelt, studying the pattern, the spacing, the direction. Every instinct in him whispered, "This isn't a wolf. This is her. Her." It was the name he had given the theoretical leopard in his notes. She had no ID tag, no satellite collar, no records, just rumors from yak herders, a fuzzy trail camera shot, and a deep scar in his memory. 2 winters ago, his assistant had been lost in a snowstorm during a similar mission. They'd been tracking a snow leopard that had circled their camp. By the time the storm cleared, only Elian returned. Guilt had followed him since. Now perhaps fate had brought him back to the same peaks, to finish what was started, or maybe to be forgiven. He followed the trail cautiously, step by step. The prints led upward, skirting along a cliff face that dropped into the icy abyss. The wind screamed louder here. Ice crunched beneath his boots. He didn't dare speak. Silence was survival. Then for a split second, he saw her. Across a ravine, standing atop a boulder, the snow leopard turned her head. Her fur, mottled in white and gray, blended seamlessly with the terrain. Only her eyes, sharp and yellow like sunlit amber, stood out. Their gaze locked. Elian's breath caught. He didn't reach for his camera. He didn't dare blink. And then, she was gone. A leap into the shadows. A swirl of powdery snow. As if she had never been there at all. He stood motionless for a long time. Not far from where she had stood, Elian noticed something strange. A disturbance in the snow. A small, half-buried carcass. He moved closer and saw it was a barrel, a Himalayan blue sheep, freshly killed, but only half-eaten. Odd. Snow leopards rarely left a kill unfinished unless something had interrupted her. A scent, a sound, a trap. His mind raced, and that's when he saw it, the faint glint of steel beneath the snow. A snare, a poacher's snare, set with precision, hidden well, dangerous. Elian's jaw clenched. This wasn't just about observation anymore. It was a mission, to save her. Elian crouched low beside the snare, brushing away more snow with gloved hands until the full trap revealed itself. Coiled steel with barbs sharpened like fangs, waiting patiently to bite. It gleamed coldly in the dying light, and his gut churned with rage. This wasn't random. This was precise, intentional. A professional had laid this trap, someone who knew the territory, who knew the habits of predators like her. It was buried at a bend in the ravine, concealed beneath a thin sheet of ice where the snow leopard would have leapt to cross. It wasn't meant for blue sheep. It was meant for her. Elian took a slow breath, steam curling from his lips. His eyes moved to the carcass nearby, still fresh, warmth barely leached from the belly. Blood stained the snow like ink on a canvas. The leopard had been here, not more than an hour ago. Had she fed? Had she sensed the trap and fled? Or had something startled her? A low hum of dread pulsed through his chest. If she was injured, snared and dragging metal through snow, she wouldn't last long. Not here. Not in this wind. This isolation. And especially not with poachers likely circling back to collect their kill. He stood slowly, eyes scanning the cliffs. The mountains offered no clues. They never did. Just stone and silence. But his instincts screamed, "Go!" Now the trail picked up again on the other side of the carcass. Prints, deeper now, erratic. The symmetry was gone. A limp? He began moving, fast but careful, following the signs like a prayer etched in snow. The terrain sloped upward, then narrowed into a rocky chute lined with scree and wind-scoured shrubs. His breath came harder in the thin air, but he didn't stop, not even when the light began to fade and the mist rolled in. Each print told a story: hesitation, weight shift, drag. She was hurt. An hour passed, then two. Shadows stretched like claws across the ridge. Snow fell in soft curtains, erasing her path behind him. And just as he reached the edge of a wide, flat plateau flanked by sheer walls, he saw her again, barely. At the far side, curled beneath a shelf of overhanging rock, lay the snow leopard. Her flanks rose and fell in slow, shallow movements. Her tail was curled tightly around her hind legs. Blood marked the white fur on one paw, a smear trailing into a twisted, silent coil of wire. The snare was still attached. Elian's body froze. She lifted her head weakly, and their eyes met once more. No rage, no fear, only exhaustion and acceptance. Elian knew animals. He had seen terror in the eyes of trapped wolves, fury in injured bears. But this was something else. This was trust, however faint, however fragile. He lowered his pack gently to the ground, hands raised, showing he held no weapon. His boots crunched softly on the snow as he stepped forward, inch by inch. The leopard's eyes tracked him, but she did not move, her body too drained. When he finally reached her side, he knelt, close enough to smell the iron of blood and the sharp tang of stress. The snare had twisted around her foreleg, the metal biting deep into flesh. Muscle was exposed. Bone, maybe. It was a wonder she had gotten this far at all. "I'm going to help you," Elian whispered, more to himself than to her. "Just hold on." He reached for his bag with trembling fingers, retrieving a foldable cutting tool and antiseptic spray. His heart thundered in his chest, hands sweating inside insulated gloves. One wrong move, one twitch of pain, and she could lash out, fracture bone, tear skin. But she didn't. She stayed, as if she understood, as if something ancient in her wild blood recognized something honest in him. It took 15 agonizing minutes to remove the snare. Elian worked with precision, cutting and peeling the twisted wire from muscle without applying more pressure. Blood welled, then slowed. He applied the antiseptic. It hissed on raw flesh, but the leopard didn't flinch. He wrapped the limb with gauze from his med kit, improvising a tight splint with climbing tape. By the end, sweat drenched his back despite the cold. He exhaled, finally, watching her breathing steady. The snow began to fall harder. They were alone in the silence, just man and ghost, wounded, weathered, watching. And for the first time in his life, Elian felt the line between species blur, faintly, beautifully, into something that could only be called connection. The storm came quickly. Elian had just finished reinforcing the makeshift bandage on the leopard's leg when the first gust hit, sharp, slicing through layers of fabric like needles of ice. Clouds spilled over the peaks, swallowing the sky. Snow whirled in sideways sheets, blurring the world into nothing but gray and white. They couldn't stay there. He glanced down at the leopard, still breathing, but her eyes were dull now, her muscles slack. The pain, the blood loss, the cold. It was all too much. She wouldn't survive another hour exposed on this ridge. With great care, Elian removed his thick parka and unzipped the emergency bivy sack strapped to his pack. It was a lightweight shelter, barely enough for one person, but it would have to do. Laying it open beside her, he hesitated. "How do you carry a wounded snow leopard?" he whispered softly, reassuringly, as he reached beneath her body. She weighed more than he expected, dense with muscle though her frame was lean. She whimpered once, the sound cutting him like glass. but didn't strike. That silence, that restraint meant everything. He lifted her slowly, straining with effort, and slid her into the bivy sack. She trembled inside the cocoon of warmth. Elian zipped it shut, leaving space for her head to breathe, and then began to drag the entire structure toward a hollow he'd spotted earlier. A wind-protected depression beneath a boulder shaped like a crouching beast. It took nearly an hour. Snow coated his beard, soaked his boots, numbed his fingers. The wind howled louder, as if trying to stop him, to push him back into helplessness. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. When they finally reached the shelter, he collapsed beside her, gasping for breath. The rock overhead cut the wind in half. It wasn't warm, but it was survivable. He reached into his backpack, pulling out what little food he had left. Protein bars, dried meat, glucose gel. He chewed quickly, forcing himself to eat. Then he reached for his canteen, unscrewed it, and tilted a few drops into the leopard's mouth. She resisted at first, jaw tight, but then, slowly, she swallowed. A flicker of will returned to her eyes. That night, they huddled beneath that rock like two dying stars clinging to warmth. Elian wrapped her in his blanket and stayed awake, every so often checking her breathing, adjusting the bandage. He spoke to her softly, stories from childhood, tales of forests and cities and the weight of guilt. He confessed about the assistant he lost, how the snow had taken him, how this mission wasn't just scientific, it was penance. She blinked slowly, as if listening, and when dawn finally broke, casting pale gold over the endless white, she was still alive. Elian sat in silence, his back pressed against the cold stone behind him, knees drawn up to his chest. The storm had passed, leaving behind a glittering world of silence. Snow clung to every crevice, every ridge, like the mountain had pulled a blanket over itself and gone still. He turned to look at her. The snow leopard, this ghost of the peaks, lay curled in the bivy sack, her breath rising in faint rhythmic clouds. Her eyes were closed, but her chest lifted with each inhale. The gauze wrapped around her leg had darkened in places, stained with blood, but the bleeding had stopped. She had made it through the night. Elian let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. A raw, trembling sound left his throat, somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "You're still with me," he murmured. He reached forward and gently touched her side through the fabric, just for a moment. She twitched but didn't move away. That small tolerance stirred something deep in his chest. He wasn't alone up here anymore. The sun climbed higher, warming the air by degrees. Elian used the reprieve to gather dry twigs and moss from beneath the rocks. He built a small fire, sheltered on three sides, and warmed water in a metal cup for broth. As it simmered, the scent drifted into the air, mixing with pine, cold stone, and something unmistakably wild. A sound, a deep, low rasp, startled him. He turned. The leopard was awake. Her head was raised slightly, her golden eyes watching him, unblinking. Her tongue ran along her jaw slowly, and Elian could see the fatigue still heavy in her limbs. But there was a flicker in her eyes now, a light that hadn't been there the night before. He held out the cup. "You need to drink, just a little." She didn't move, but she didn't growl either. Elian set the cup a foot away from her head, then backed off, hands open in peace. The fire cracked gently, casting dancing shadows across the rock. After a minute, she leaned forward and sniffed the cup. Then gingerly, she drank. Elian watched in awe. Every small movement, each flick of her ear, each rise and fall of her chest, felt monumental, sacred. He knew how easily this trust could be broken. One false step, one surge of pain or panic, and she would revert to instinct. She would vanish into the cliffs or lash out. But for now, she stayed. They spent that day together in silence. He kept the fire alive, fed her in small doses, bits of dried goat meat soaked in broth, and she slept in long, dreamless stretches. Occasionally, she would open one eye to check that he was still there, then close it again. He took notes in his journal with gloved fingers, documenting every detail: her paw size, the pattern of her rosettes, the depth of her wound, her respiration rate. But it wasn't just science anymore. It was something more personal, more urgent. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the serrated horizon, painting the mountains in purple and ash, Elian stood at the edge of the outcrop, staring into the endless expanse. He remembered the first time he saw a snow leopard on a nature documentary when he was 10 years old. A grainy shot of a ghost-like cat vanishing behind a ridge. Something about it had gripped him, a hunger to understand, to witness the unseen. That moment had shaped his life, and now here he was, not as a spectator, but as a participant. Behind him the leopard shifted in her sleep. He turned and looked at her again, curled beneath rock and cloth, breathing against impossible odds. Something inside him shifted. He wasn't just trying to save her anymore. She was saving something in him. The second night was colder. The firewood was nearly gone, and the wind returned, not as a storm this time, but as a whispering presence, curling around rocks, tugging at loose cloth, carrying strange sounds down from the ridgelines. Elian lay awake, curled beside the bivy sack where the leopard slept, every muscle tense despite his exhaustion. He didn't know why, he just felt it. A shift, a wrongness. At first he thought it was the altitude playing tricks on him, the long hours, the isolation. But then just before dawn, he heard it, a distant sound, mechanical, faint, not the wind. He sat up sharply, straining his ears. There it was again, like an engine, a snowmobile. His heart dropped. No one was supposed to be up here. This section of the range was off limits to civilians. Too dangerous, too remote. But to the right buyer, a snow leopard's pelt was worth a fortune, and poachers had a way of finding corners where no eyes watched. Elian scrambled out of the shelter, leaving the leopard bundled and hidden beneath the rock. He climbed to a higher vantage point, boots slipping on frozen stone, breath catching in the bitter cold. And there, just beyond the rise, he saw them. Two figures on snowmobiles weaving through the valley below. Dark helmets, rifles slung across their backs. Professional, methodical, and heading straight toward the ridge. His mind raced. They were checking the traps. He looked back toward the makeshift shelter, hidden from view. If they got any closer, they might spot signs. The dragged bivy sack, the fire pit, even footprints. Panic threatened to rise, but he shoved it down. Number think. You've got minutes, maybe less. He slid back down the ridge, gathered what little he could, his backpack, the journal, the camp stove. Then he crouched beside the leopard. She was awake now, eyes wide, ears twitching. She smelled it too, her muscles tense beneath the blanket. No, Elian whispered gently. Stay down, not yet. He needed to move her. Now, but she couldn't run. And if they were found together, if they saw her injured, they wouldn't hesitate. Elian looked around, searching for options. The ridge curved behind them, steep, narrow, and flanked by ice. Too dangerous for snowmobiles, but navigable by foot. If he could lead her down the switchback trail, they could reach the hidden glacier cave he'd passed 3 days ago. It would be a brutal descent, but it was their only chance. He knelt, placed his hand on her side. I know it hurts, he whispered, but we have to go. Please. For a moment she stared at him, then slowly pushed herself upright. Her bandaged leg trembled, but she held her ground. Elian swallowed hard. Then they moved. They moved like shadows. Elian stayed close behind her, his hand hovering inches from her side. She limped, her injured leg trembling with each step, but she did not collapse. Her breath came in soft huffs. Snow clung to her flanks. Every so often she paused, ears flicking, eyes scanning the ridgeline behind them. She knew they were being hunted. The trail was narrow, a crumbling line etched into the mountainside. Below them, the slope dropped hundreds of feet into a basin of ice and broken stone. One wrong step, and it was over. Elian's boots skidded once. He caught himself on a jagged outcrop, heart pounding. He turned back just in time to see the leopard steady herself on 3 legs, her tail swaying to counterbalance. The wind howled past them, carrying a sound that froze his blood. Engines. Closer now. He didn't dare look back. The path narrowed again, just wide enough for a human, not a machine. That was their advantage. But it wouldn't last. If the poachers ditched their snowmobiles, they could follow on foot. And if they had dogs, Elian pressed forward. Minutes bled into a breathless hour. The sun rose higher, painting the cliffs gold and bone white. Twice the leopard faltered, once stumbling to her knees. Each time Elian helped her up with whispers and open palms, guiding her gently forward. He could see blood again, fresh spots dotting the snow like petals. "We're almost there," he whispered. "Just a little more." The path curved around a sheer face of rock, and there finally he saw it, the glacier cave, an ancient scar in the ice, wide enough for shelter, invisible from above. It had taken him half a day to find it last time. Now it felt like salvation. They stumbled inside, cold, dark, but safe. Elian moved quickly, gathering snow to mask their tracks outside. Then he slid a flat stone across the entrance, just enough to block the light, just enough to make them disappear. Inside, he turned back. She was collapsed against the icy wall, sides heaving. Her leg bled again, the bandage soaked through. He knelt beside her and pressed gauze against the wound, biting down on panic. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "Just hold on a little longer." Outside, the sound of engines stopped. Silence. Then, voices, muffled, sharp, foreign. They were close. Elian froze, not daring to breathe. The leopard's eyes met his, wide, alert, waiting. They didn't move. For minutes that stretched into forever, they listened, ears straining, bodies pressed to ice. Footsteps crunched above the cave, a faint clicking, a radio, then a voice louder now, frustrated, angry, and then retreating. The sound faded, gone, but neither of them moved. Only when the first tremble of breath returned to Elian's lungs did he finally exhale. They were safe, for now. The silence didn't last. Within the dim glacier cave, the temperature dropped quickly. Elian could feel the chill creeping through his boots, numbing his toes and slowing his breath. He reached for his pack, fumbled with stiff fingers, and unwrapped the emergency blanket. But when he turned back toward her, something was wrong. The snow leopard had shifted in her rest. No, not rest. Her body convulsed once, then again. "Elira," he whispered. He didn't know why he used the name. He had only scribbled it once in his journal, a placeholder for something too wild to name. But now it slipped from his mouth as if it had always belonged to her. She didn't respond. Her limbs twitched, muscles jerking erratically. Her breathing was ragged, shallow and quick, like a bird trapped in a net. The bandage on her leg was soaked, crimson seeping into the icy floor beneath her. "No, no, no." Elian dropped beside her, ripping off his gloves. Her fur was damp with sweat and blood. He pressed his ear to her chest. A heartbeat. Too fast. Too weak. She was going into shock. The wound wasn't just bleeding, it was infected. And in this cold, with no access to proper antibiotics or surgical tools, she was dying. He scrambled for his kit. There was only so much he could do. He had painkillers, mild ones meant for field sedation. He had antiseptics, bandages, but no antibiotics strong enough for this. He opened a vial of antiseptic and doused the wound again, hissing through his teeth as the blood frothed. She groaned low in her throat, her head thrashing weakly against the icy floor. I know. I'm sorry. Stay with me." He pulled the used gauze away, layers of it. Flesh beneath was torn, puckered around where the metal had bit into the leg. He could see the discoloration now, an ugly blackish ring spreading from the wound outward. Necrosis. Elian's breath caught in his throat. If the infection spreads to the bloodstream, she won't make it through the night. He had to do something. Now he reached into the bottom of his bag and pulled out a scalpel. Not meant for her, not meant for this. His hand trembled as he stared at it, then at the wound. No time. He poured more antiseptic over the blade and steadied himself. She shifted again, breathing harsh and shallow. "I'm sorry," he whispered. And he cut. The blade dropped from Elian's fingers with a dull clang against the stone. Blood was everywhere, thick, dark, more than he had expected. His hands were slick with it. His breath came in sharp, uneven bursts, fogging the air. He had done what he could, cut away the dying flesh, flushed the wound, packed it with clean gauze soaked in iodine. Now there was nothing left but time and hope. He sat slumped against the wall of the cave, knees to his chest, hands cradled in his lap like they no longer belonged to him. His body shivered uncontrollably, from cold or exhaustion or guilt. He couldn't tell anymore. Illyra lay still. Her chest rose, but barely. Her eyes remained closed. He pressed 2 fingers to her side again. Her heartbeat was still there. Barely. "Don't go," he whispered. The words echoed off the ice like a plea to the mountain itself. Outside, the wind returned, a low moan, rising and falling like breath across a dying world. Snow slid past the cave entrance in waves, piling into soft drifts that muffled all sound. The poachers were long gone. The storm had taken their scent, their voices, their threat. But death still lingered. It always did. Elian pressed his forehead to his knees. He had seen animals die before, snared, poisoned, broken. He had documented carcasses picked clean by wind and time. But this was different. This wasn't data. This wasn't research. This was her. He didn't know how long he sat there. Minutes, hours. The cold crept back in, gnawing at his skin. His fire had long gone out. His limbs were numb, but he didn't move. He watched her, waited, hoped. The memories came unbidden. His first expedition to Ladakh, the bitter laughter of his assistant when their tent collapsed in a blizzard, the way they had shared stories of dreams and failure, life and risk until the cold swallowed one of them whole. And now this, another mountain, another life, another reckoning. He blinked and a tear slipped down his cheek, quickly freezing in place. "I'm not enough," he whispered. And then, movement. The sound was faint, the smallest shift of fur against stone. He raised his head. Illyra's tail twitched. Barely. He held his breath. Then, another movement. Her paw flexed. Her body stirred. A shallow breath became a deeper one. Her eyes opened. Slowly, heavily, golden, alive. Elian didn't move, didn't speak. He just sat there, frozen, watching the miracle unfold in front of him. She turned her head weakly in his direction. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something passed between them. Not words, not survival, recognition. She was still here, and somehow so was he. The hours that followed were slow and fragile. Illyra slept in long, uneven stretches, sometimes trembling, sometimes stirring with small growls of pain. Elian kept close but still, every muscle tuned to her slightest sound. When she drank, even a few sips, it felt like a victory. When she shifted her head toward the light, he nearly wept. He fed her from his rations in careful pieces, soaked meat, broth-soaked bread, softened protein. She took them reluctantly at first as though unfamiliar with kindness. But she ate. Her leg remained swollen, raw and seeping, but the black ring around the wound no longer spread. The fever broke the second night. Elian felt the heat leave her body like a shadow lifting. She was healing, not fast, not perfectly, but healing. By the third morning, Illyra tried to stand. Elian rushed to her side, hands raised, voice low. "Easy, not yet." She looked at him, longer this time. No fear, no resistance. Her breath steamed gently in the cave light. Then she sat back, head high, shoulders squared despite the tremor in her limbs. She was remembering who she was, and Elian was remembering too. Not just the scientist, not the conservationist buried in guilt, but the boy who had once believed in quiet magic, in the wild and wordless truths that live between species. Somewhere along the way, he'd lost that belief. She had given it back. Later that afternoon, while refitting her bandage, Elian laughed for the first time in weeks, a dry, incredulous sound that startled even himself. Illyra had licked his hand. It wasn't playful. It wasn't even affectionate in the way people understood it. But it was deliberate, a gesture, an acknowledgement. "I see you. You stayed." That night, Elian didn't write in his journal. He simply sat outside the cave entrance, staring at the stars flickering through the icy air, his back pressed against stone, Illyra resting just behind him. No words were needed. There, in the cold, with the mountain wrapped in silence, he felt something he hadn't known in years. Peace. The snow began to melt. Not all at once, not in rivers, but slowly, subtly, with each sunrise. Cracks formed in the ice above the cave. Water trickled down the rock walls. The sky turned paler with every dawn. Spring was stirring in the bones of the mountain, and with it, Elira began to rise. Each day she stood longer, walked a little farther. Her limp remained, but the strength was returning to her shoulders, her gaze, her breath. Her eyes no longer watched him with wariness, but with quiet knowing. Elian spent those final days preparing. He boiled snow for water, smoked what meat he had left, repacked his gear, wrapped Elira's leg one last time with cleaner, drier cloth. And on the seventh morning, she didn't wait for his signal. She stepped out of the cave on her own. The light caught her fur, casting her in silver and gold. She blinked into the wind, nose twitching. The land lay below them in sweeping folds, stone and shadow and sky, untouched. It was time. Elian followed at a distance, his pack strapped tight, his steps heavy. He didn't try to stop her, didn't call her back. Some goodbyes could only be silent. They reached the same ridge where he had first seen her, days, or was it years, ago. She turned there looking back at him. The moment stretched thin. Then she moved forward, a leap across the ravine, a flash of white against rock. Gone, but not lost. He stood there long after she had vanished into the folds of the mountain. The wind pressed at his coat. His breath misted and disappeared. But he didn't feel alone. He turned and began the long descent back to the world below. Weeks passed. Elian returned to base camp. His journal grew thick with pages, not of sightings, but of memory, of what it meant to witness something wild and not claim it, to save a life without possessing it. He sent reports, filed data, packed crates, accepted handshakes from colleagues. But he kept one note, folded carefully inside his coat pocket. She trusted me, even when she shouldn't have. Spring turned to summer. The range bloomed with strange colors, purple moss, golden grass, distant rains. Tourists returned to the lower trails. Helicopters buzzed overhead again. The mountain stirred, but it was never quite the same. Neither was he. And then, one morning, months later, on the ridge above the old trail, he saw her, Elira, perched on a high stone, coat gleaming in the morning sun, her tail curled elegantly around her paws. She watched him, no fear, no threat, just stillness, recognition. Elian didn't move. He didn't raise a camera, didn't even smile. He simply stood, and she did the same. Then with a flick of her tail, she turned and disappeared, once more, into the wilderness that had birthed her. But this time, he didn't feel the weight of loss, only gratitude and peace. Dear friend, thank you for walking this path with us. If Elira's journey touched your heart, let her story live on. Through your voice, like, share, subscribe. And always remember, even in the coldest corners of the world, a single act of kindness can change everything.